No, that's the truth. You don't have to whisper. We talked about that last week.
Okay.
So we talked about
Especially
the
during the bubonic plague, like a lot of the
yep, the Black
Moors
Death.
actually
Yep.
came in, helped those people out, helped
Yeah.
those cities out,
Yes.
rebuilt a lot.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of the architecture, like in modern times now, like the arches.
Yep.
Love
How
the
do you know all of
arches.
this?
Oh no, I'm pretty smart.
Yeah. So
Yeah, so
you
I know like
read.
the arches and like a lot of things that we've taken over, like here.
Hmm.
Like a lot of white people didn't like, they didn't use soap.
Yeah.
They didn't use oils. They were ashy.
Yeah. So we went over a lot of that last week. We went over how um, in 711 Moors went into Spain, Al Andalus, and helped them resist the Trinitarian Byzantine Romans. And then from there, that's how the age of what's known as the Renaissance came to be in Europe. And we talked about how in this book, the golden age of the Moor by Ivan van Sertima, how there were steam engines in Africa before there were paved roads in London. Yeah, and how Oxford University was so a few Jewish people went to learn from the Moors in Cordova in Spain, and then they took those ideas back to Northern Europe and built Oxford University. Yeah,
Look at that.
yeah,
Hello.
yeah. So that's why I said what I said with the in the video with Ye, how we're more than just slaves. And then even the topic for today, the transatlantic slave trade, there's more to that story than we're told. I went to Tolman, right over there, Tolman High School. My mother went to Tolman. My wife's mother went to Tolman. My sister went to Tolman. And I was basically taught that our people were slaves because Europeans had guns and we didn't. And that's not true at all.
Slaves existed since, I mean, the beginning of time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People always taking over
Yeah.
each other, you know?
Yep.
I know that. I knew that slaves existed since the beginning of time. But a lot of the things that I'm like confused about, where are the Moors now?
Yeah. So
where did the Moors originate from? And
those are good questions.
Where are the Moors now? Where did they originate from? Like, because I know like a lot of speculations. I mean, you guys aren't Arabs, right? You guys are more black. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
So you guys aren't Arabs.
So that I'll answer those questions. I'll answer all three of those questions.
Well, I'm just like spitfiring. So
That's fine.
You know.
You just got to give me an opportunity to answer because you're asking good questions. Where the Moors come from? We believe that we are descendants of Moab. You know who Moab is? It's from the Bible. The grandson of Lot. There's at least two migrations that have been documented.
Wasn't Lot
the nephew of Abraham?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. There's two migrations of Moors, two major migrations of Moors that we know of. One was after the death of Moses and Joshua ruled. You'll see in the Bible where God talks to the Israelites and says, don't harm Moab because he was promised a portion of the promised land through Lot. But you'll see that a lot of Moors were driven out, so they left. A lot of Moors left and went west into Egypt and so on. And then you'll see in like Egyptian steles, or however you pronounce the word, you'll see the Egyptians refer to the Lebu people, who you'll see that they're descendants of Moors. So the word Moor is derived from Moab. That was, I don't know what year that was, but during the time of Abraham and Lot, that's around 2000 BCE.
So you guys are the people of God, basically.
Yeah. Then there's another migration of Moors, western, when the Persians fought the Egyptians in around 6 something BCE. And that is when the Moabite people disappeared, allegedly.
You guys are really more northern Africa?
Yeah. And that's where the kingdoms of Tunis, Tripoli, Fez, Morocco, and this idea of the Maghrib, Al-Aqsa, which means the western or the most extreme west, and the kingdom of the west, and the Barbary states and the Barbary pirates, and then those Moors that went into Spain in 711 AD. There's books written in Latin at the time about King Alfonso, and he refers to the Almoravids as Moors and as Moabites. So that chronicles or proves the fact that those Moors from Moab, which is present modern day Jordan, at least some of them did migrate west. And this is where we believe we have our origin from. So we are descendants of God's people. That's one of our beliefs. We believe that we migrated from first Mesopotamia through Lot, then even western from the kingdom of Moab after Moses died, and then a second large migration of Moors took place when the Persians waged war with the Egyptian Empire. And then we moved even further west. And this is documented throughout history. Anytime there's war, there's always refugees that leave and seek refuge to other places. So that's not an uncommon thing. And then again, when you look at the medieval period, the Crusades and the Inquisition, the books written in Latin and Spanish refer to those dark-skinned people as Moors. And even in this book right here, The Golden Age of the Moor by Ivan van Sertima, he documents how in the chronicles of King Alfonso, who was also part of the Crusades against the Moors, which is the reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula, that the Inquisition and Crusades were in fact against dark-skinned black African people. But it is to our belief that we were called black later after we were defeated in wars. They removed us of our identity and then gave us the name black. So we're still dark-skinned people, but we didn't refer to ourselves as black.
Not to cut you off, but
Yep.
where did the Moors get the most of their money? Like, were they merchants?
Yes. So this is where like the name Saracen comes from. So they refer to the Sahara Desert. They refer to people of the desert as Saracens. The word Sahara in Arabic means desert. So those are the people that were traversing from West Africa to Egypt to what is known as the Middle East or Asia Minor, to Turkey or Anatolia or Istanbul or Constantinople, whatever you want to call it, all the way into Asia, through Persia, so Afghanistan, through Iran, through Iraq, through Pakistan, through India, all the way into China, all the way through the Mongolians, Turkmenistan, all of that. And you'll even see there's ancient depictions of Turkish people with brown skin wearing red fezzes in their temples. And you'll see when you look at the time period of during Prophet Muhammad, you'll see that a few of his companions went as far east as China and built mosques there. And then because of Prophet Muhammad's companions, they fought against the Byzantine Roman Empire and freed the territories of North Africa that were once under the Christian rule. And that's why the Moors went into Spain in 711, because the Vandals asked the Moors to help fight against King Roderick, who was a Trinitarian, because there's a time period in Christianity where the Arians were fighting against the Trinitarians. They were fighting against this idea that God is the Trinity, and this idea that Jesus is God, and this idea that God is not one thing, he's three things. So there were Christians that didn't believe that, and they were fighting against the Romans. And this is where Arianism comes from. So during the time 711 AD, the Visigothic kingdoms have always been Arians. They always opposed this belief that they opposed the created idea.
Aren't the Aryans the white people?
Yeah, so Arians they're followers of Arius, who was a priest, who was fighting against other priests promoting this idea that Jesus is God.
Wouldn't those be like the Eastern European people?
Germans, yeah. The
Eastern
Deutsch.
Europeans and Russians, like some Russians.
Yeah, yes. So and this is the basis of all of the wars back then. You know, so when you see the Reconquista, it was the Trinitarians that took control again. And this is the difference between the Holy Roman Empire, which is predominantly German, Deutsch, and then the Roman Empire, which is the Romans, and Italy and Byzantine, the people of Constantinople. And this is why the Romans always had infighting, because they were fighting to promote this idea, this new idea, that Jesus is God and he was crucified. The Arians didn't believe he was crucified, and then the Muslims that were, the prophecy that was revealed by Prophet Muhammad in the 600s, from 610 to 640, I believe, they were told that he wasn't crucified. And then, go ahead.
Do the Moors believe he was crucified?
If the Moors are Muslims, then they do not believe he was crucified.
Oh, there's different types of Moors.
Yeah, Moors have the right to believe whatever they want to believe. So they have the right to freedom of religion.
Maybe it's an stupid question, but
There's no such thing as a stupid question.
Okay, I have a question that will show my ignorance.
Yes.
So I want to know what the Moors' beliefs are surrounding, in comparison to Christians.
Yeah.
They have this, God created the world in 6 days, and the seventh day he rested, and he made the man first and took a rib and then made the woman, and the first people were Adam and Eve in the garden. So
Yeah.
that's the Christian belief.
Mm-hmm.
The Muslim belief is something completely and totally different. What do the Moors believe around the first creations of God, of people?
Yeah. So the Muslim belief isn't completely different. The Muslim belief is that God created everything, but the distinction is that God doesn't need to rest. We don't believe that God gets tired or sleepy or bored, or we don't believe that. So we don't believe that God rested. We do believe that Adam was created on a specific day, and we believe that day was Friday. That's why Friday is the holy day. And then we believe that God, seeing that Adam was lonely, and then created Hawa or Eve to provide love and companionship to him. And this is where the law of marriage comes from, and the sanctity of
They
marriage
believe
comes
in
from.
the taking of the rib to create the woman.
Yes.
Real quick, now that we're talking about the beginning of time,
Mhm.
how do you feel about the idea of Lilith? Because I really do think, like, in my mind, I think, well, this is my perception, like, God is perfect.
Mhm.
So God wouldn't just make man by himself.
Mhm.
He'd make a man and a woman at the same time from the dirt.
Mhm.
Like, do you believe in Lilith? Do the Moors believe in Lilith?
What do you mean? What do you mean by Lilith? Do you mean Eve? Do you mean?
No, like Lilith. I mean, Lilith is the idea that God created a man and a woman at the same time from the dirt, but that Lilith decided that she didn't want to be like underneath Adam, so she didn't want to like lay with him. Like, you get what I mean by underneath? She didn't want to lay with him because she felt like she was one of the first humans too.
So
she
that
rebelled against God.
that is the story that we have about Iblis, Shaitan. How in the
Okay, so
creation
that's
of
another name
Adam, so in the creation of Adam, there was a jinn that served God, that served Allah, to fight other jinn who were creating corruption on earth. So as a jinn, he had this sense of pride when God was creating our forefather Adam out of clay. So when God told the angels and everything that in heaven to prostrate to our ancestor Adam, Iblis said no. So whereas before he was obedient to God and submissive to God, and of course the angels don't have free will, so they just had to submit to Adam. Iblis said no, and then it was his pride that cast him out of heaven. So Allah asked Iblis, "Why did you refuse to submit to Adam?" He said, "Well, you made him out of clay, and I'm made out of fire. I'm superior to him. So since that has no standing in earth or in heaven, he was cast out of heaven." And then this is where he requested some type of respite from Allah and said, he essentially said, since you cast me out of heaven, I'm going to deceive your creation. And Allah said, that's fine, but you will not be able to harm my creation. And this is where throughout the Quran we're told that on Judgment Day we're going to try to say, well, Satan made me do it. And then Satan's response is going to be, all I did was misguide you. You took the action. So that's essentially the story behind that.
Isn't that why they say that Jesus is gonna be like our lawyer?
Or who?
Our lawyer.
Lawyer?
Yeah,
Intercessor?
in
So
heaven,
yeah, so
like
there
he's
is.
gonna be like our lawyer in heaven,
Yeah,
like
so
he's
there
gonna be
there
there for us.
is several times in the Quran where Allah talks about intercession, because all the prophets are going to stand before Allah just like we are, and they're going to be asked, and a lot of their response is going to be, I gave the message, but I do not know what my people did after I left. Only you know. And this is where the story gets tricky, because the Romans claim to have crucified Jesus, but then they created, the same Romans that claimed to crucify Jesus created the Nicene Creed in 325 AD, and then formed the entire structure of modern day Christianity today. The same people that claim to have murdered him. And that was around the 300s. So this is why Allah sent another messenger to clear up the confusion that they were creating about Christ in real Christianity. And this is why I
Were they
said,
jealous of Jesus Christ?
I mean, it's just evil people doing evil things. Whatever their intent is just evil. They were trying to get people to worship them, and this is where they adopted a lot of their pagan symbols into Christianity with the cross and things like that. Because in the book of Moses it says, "Do not create any graven image of anything in heaven, on earth, or in the ocean, and do not bow to it." and then you'll see a lot of Romans, they have pictures of Mary and pictures of Christ, and then they worship that. Or they'll even pray, they'll ask Saint Mary to do something for them, or they'll ask Jesus to do something for them. When we're told that all of the prophets came and said, I'm only a servant of God, so worship God, not me. So this is where the confusion comes from. And this is where a lot of people get turned off to religion, but they're not aware of the actual history that took place, the actual wars that were fought against these ideas and the promotion of these things, and the history and the context behind the Crusades, and the history and context behind the Inquisition, because these were wars fought to promote these ideas, these false ideas. The Muslims didn't force anyone to submit to them. The Christians did. And that's documented facts. Anytime a Muslim kingdom ruler was in charge of any territory, if you were Christian, you could freely practice. If you were Jewish, you could freely practice. And if you were Muslim, you could freely practice. Even if you didn't believe, you could freely practice, because that's part of the Quran. It says it in the book. It says in the Quran that it doesn't matter if you call yourself a Christian, a Sabian, or a Jew. If you submit to the will of God and you do righteousness, then you'll be admitted into heaven.
Amen.
And God even says he created humanity with this diversity of everything so that way we can learn from each other. So now he's testing us through our differences to see who amongst us is the best, and that's exactly what the book says. So if you're a Christian and you're a Jew and I'm a Muslim, he put us in different stages to see how we're going to react. Am I going to oppress you? Are you going to oppress her? Is she going to oppress me?
Is that what we're seeing right now in Palestine?
Yes, it's
Like
a
our own
continuation
people-
of that.
Yeah, like our own people are like turning against each other.
Yeah, it's a continuation of that. It even says in the Quran that the Christians and the Jews will be allies amongst each other, and that's exactly what's happening now. The state of Israel are being supported by Christian countries. It's the continuation of the Spanish Inquisition and the Christian Crusades against Muslim people who just so happen to look like everybody in this room, us. And then that's why the last class I showed the book, How to Teach a Negro to Be Christian. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to second, that's our belief.
Mm-hmm.
You said it before, and you just said it again. We are, all black people are Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't know it.
Yeah.
Why? Because
Because that history.
Islam means peace,
Mm-hmm.
and Muslim means one who submits his will to do the will of God.
Yeah.
And so black people are God's people.
Yes.
And so we're all Muslim by nature.
Yes.
I just wanted to throw that in to say, okay, we just met.
Yeah.
We meet.
And Louis Farrakhan talked about Prophet Noble Drew Ali and how Elijah Muhammad talked about the forerunners, and he mentioned two of them, Marcus Garvey and Noble Drew Ali. There's a video of him saying that. There's even pictures of people believe Farad Muhammad in the same picture as Prophet Noble Drew Ali. So a lot of it's documented from several universities that Noble Drew Ali, through the Moorish Science Temple of America, was the first institution to bring Islam back to the United States. It's documented. And that's where a lot of the movement started from. This is why the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths, this is why the Nation of Islam, Moorish Science, we all have similar teachings because it all started from the same source. And all of it, Noble Drew Ali, and all of it is part of the religion of Islam. It's the message of God. Yes, we are. We were created by God, yes. But do we all submit to God? That's the question. We don't, because God said, do not murder. There's people that's murdering right now. God said, don't drink. There's people drinking right now. God said, don't smoke. There's people smoking right now. God said, don't gossip. God said, don't gossip, don't backbite. How many times do we hear people or how many times have we ourselves talking about someone behind their back? And how often have we seen it with our own eyes, how that causes division amongst our people? In fact, the entire counterintelligence program movement against our people was based off backbiting. Oh, so-and-so's an agent. Oh, so-and-so's sleeping with so-and-so's wife. They called Stokely Carmichael's mother and said, hey, the Panthers plan to kill you, so he fled to Africa. They tried to get the Black Panthers and Jeff Fort through the El Ruckins to war with each other in Chicago. So it's a reason why God has these laws.
Why did these folks get together and put all this energy into causing these white folks?
Oh,
the FBI,
because it's the continuation of the Christian Crusades against our people. They just changed the name. This is why last class I had everyone pull up their phone, look up the Ku Klux Klan's outfit, and you see the cone heads, Then look up the Spanish Inquisition's outfit, and it's the same exact uniform. And when you look up the reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula, they were murdering our people. They then changed it from Christian versus Muslim to black versus white. They changed. All they did was change. And I talk about it in this lecture, and I show you the Virginian slave law where they did it. And this is why they created things like the Willie Lynch letter.
Or the Jim Crow
Yeah,
laws.
Jim. It's just a continuation of the same exact thing. They just call it something else to confuse us, and then erase the word "more" from the history books and say black, black, blackity, black, blackity, black, black, black. And then our people have this identity crisis because we don't know who we are. We don't know how black we are, what kind of black we are. Are we hood black, regular black? What kind of black?
What did you say about the Willie Lynch syndrome?
Yeah, so these things were created after we fell. There was a series of wars, and I'm talking about this in this lecture, a series of wars that we had with these people, with Christians. And once we fell, they removed us of our identity, history, and culture. And that's where modern day colonization comes from.
So the Willie Lynch syndrome came about to get the slaves in order and keep control, maintain control.
To put us where we are today.
Like you would pay Mr. Lynch to come speak in front of 1 million different slave masters and teach them this is what you do
How
to
to
control your
oppress them.
slaves.
Yeah,
for the next
like the
100
church.
years. Yes.
So when you read the Christian black codes, you'll see it was illegal for our people to not be at Sunday service. That's how and why many of us are Christians, by force. Not
And we weren't allowed
freedom.
to practice.
Yeah, we
what
weren't allowed to do
practiced.
anything else. Yeah.
Yes.
That's how we got to where we got. So let's start officially. All right, so the class
You
is
gotta say that African spirituality was demonized. We weren't allowed to practice.
yeah, but most
So
of us
they
were
brought us
Muslim.
here.
Most of us were Muslim. That's documented.
No, I'm not fighting you with that.
Yeah,
because
I'm
I
just
agree.
yeah.
I'm talking about when they brought us here.
Yes.
They had a whip
Yes.
and a Bible.
Yes.
So if you wanna worship the sun, meditate at the trees or whatever, and name your baby Yeshide,
Mhm.
you're not doing that. Cause we're
Yeah.
gonna whip you.
That's where Toby and Kuta Kente comes
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
Excuse
We're
me,
gonna
yeah.
whip you, and this is what it, and we're gonna whip you, and you're gonna call us master, because.
I
we are-
watched Amistad. and
That-
it's crazy.
Sorry, go ahead.
I watched Amistad, and while they were getting everybody on the boat, how they would take like people's talismans off,
Yeah.
or how they would take people's jewelry,
Yeah,
you know,
gold.
how they would take their gold off, and they would name them like, oh, what's your new name is Maria Gonzalez.
Yeah.
And then like, oh, your new name is John this, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, and that happens to this
beautiful
day.
names.
Yeah, it happens to this day. Most people from Asia, they come, and then you ask them what their name is and say, "Oh, I'm Tom Sang-woo." Like, where'd that come from? That happens at customs. They do it there. This is your new name. Same thing that's happening in Palestine today. The Palestinians can't
I
even
didn't know
refer
that
to
happened at
themselves.
customs today.
Yeah, the Palestinians can't even refer to themselves as Palestinians. Just like when we lost the war and we became slaves, we couldn't refer to ourselves as what we refer to ourselves
So
as.
what the Palestinians have to consider themselves Israeli?
That's what the colonists are trying to force upon them, but they're not having it. They're resisting. And this is why they're called terrorists. Whoever resists colonization and Christianity, they're called terrorists. And this is why every time the European Empire wages war in any non-Christian country, they send in priests and missionaries to convert the people.
Mhm.
But it doesn't work all the time. Hence Iraq and Afghanistan. But anyway, let's start. The transatlantic slave trade. To heal, we must know the full story. We have to know the full story because once we know the full story, our perspective begins to change. And once that change happens, we win. All right, so this guy, his name is John C. Davis. He wrote Robert C. Davis. What's his name? Robert C. Davis. He wrote this book right here. Christian slaves, Muslim masters. Again, when you read history, the so-called white people are identified as Christians. The so-called black people are identified as Muslims because that's just what it was. Right? So we use the phrases black and white today. Back then, meaning prior to the 1800s, it was always Christians and Muslims. So don't think, when you hear that, the Muslims are dark-skinned people and they had light-skinned people as slaves, right? He said, long-running hostilities between Muslim and Christians in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East during these 3 centuries, meaning the 1500s to the 1800s, resulted in the enslavement of at least 3 million people of both faiths, according to Robert C. Davis, professor of history at Ohio State University. Davis examined his faith slavery, a term he coined, in his new book, Holy War and Human Bondage, Tales of Christian Muslim Slavery in the Early Modern Mediterranean. As a result of his research, Davis estimated that during these centuries, more than 1 million Muslims were enslaved in Europe, and another 2 million Christians suffered the same fate in North Africa and the Middle East. How many of you knew this?
So
Well, you knew it. I know you knew it.
Because we lost 100 million in the
Yeah, the numbers are off, but how many people knew this? Except for you and you, because you know. Exactly, right? Faith slavery had huge economic and social consequences at the time, but most people today don't even know about it. Though we are familiar with the clash between Christianity and Islam today, which a lot of people aren't, in early modern times, the balance of forces was much different from what it is now. During this period, both sides, Muslims and Christians, had nearly equal power. It was really a clash of empires, and taking slaves was part of the conflict. So this picture right here represents the fall of Granada in Spain, 1492. This gentleman right here would be, I forgot his name. What's his name? King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. They united their two kingdoms of Aragon and Castile to fight against the Moors. And you'll see all these people are brown people. See that? As a result of the fall of Moorish Spain, known at the time as Al-Andalus or Al-Andalusia, later to be called Spain in the 1600s, so it wasn't even called Spain back then, right? Christian kingdoms continued hostility against Moors and Arabs, people of brown and dark brown complexions. This was later used via social engineering to shift from the religious aspects to more of a skin color-based slavery, but this didn't happen until the 1700s. This happens in Spain today, right? So the Moorish influence in Spain is so deep that many Spaniards continue to represent their Moorish history by dressing up and painting their faces to look like the dark-skinned Moors that once ruled them. You see this, we would call this blackface. But when you read the articles, you can look this up right now. If you pull out your phone, look up blackface celebration in Spain, and you'll see articles on this, and you'll hear from the Spaniards themselves. We're not doing this out of disrespect. We're doing this to honor our history. So they're showing you who the rulers of Spain looked like. So don't get triggered. Don't have the emotional response that they want you to have. Realize that they're showing history that we don't know. But through social engineering, we'll be offended by this.
The representation's a little awkward.
Of course, because they're doing blackface.
Yeah. I mean, for us, as an American, like, because I grew up here in Florida, in the United States, I learned about a lot about Jim Crow.
Yeah.
And like how like they would like make us look like over hyper realistic, I guess, with the big lips, the lips, the dark skin. Like, I get the meaning, but it's that's true.
I understand. Let that sink in. So these people are celebrating Moors, and they give charity dressed like this. So the Barbary slave trade involved slave markets in the Moorish Empire. European slaves were acquired by the Moorish Navy via slave raids on ships and by raids on coastal towns from Italy to the Netherlands, Ireland, and the south and southwest of Britain, as far north as Iceland and into the eastern Mediterranean. Robert Davis estimated that slave traders from Tunis, Algiers, and Tripoli enslaved 1 to 1.5 million Europeans in North Africa from the beginning of the 16th century to the middle of the 18th. And then it explains how some of these numbers are off because a lot of people weren't documented. The authorities of Ottoman and pre-Ottoman times kept no relevant official records, but observers in the late 1500s and early 1600s estimated that around 35,000 European slaves were held throughout this period throughout the Moorish Empire across Tripoli and Tunis, but mostly in Algiers. And a lot of the times, the men, if they were able-bodied, would work in the ships or other forced labor mining, and there was something called janissaries. Janissaries was essentially, let's say I'm the Muslim ruler and you're the ruler of a Christian kingdom. I would say, hey, we won't wage war with you so long as you pay taxes to my kingdom and you give me 12 in a military manner to fight on behalf of the Muslim Empire. This is why a lot of depictions of the Moorish army are so-called white people, because it was a slave army. And this is why a lot of the rulers ended up having pale skin, because let's say I had this 12-year-old boy was raised up to be an elite warrior, and I said, okay, well, as Sultan, you're going to protect me. So then later down the line, that person would say, wait a minute, these people are killing my people. So then that pale-skinned person would assassinate me, who's brown, and then he would be the new Sultan, because everyone else in the military looks like him. So this is why depictions of our rulers look the way they look. And this is why a lot of North Africans have different shades, because the slave trade that lasted over 300 years, a lot of the female slaves were given to people of royal blood or wealthy people, and they had many children with them. This is why the skin tone of our people in North Africa is slightly different than sub-Saharan and things like that, because of the slave trade.
And the skin tone of our people here today in America.
Yeah.
You said that like it's a given. Like
Yeah.
you gotta say it all.
Well, I mean, it's impossible. It's impossible
mean
for me to say it
judging
all. Yeah, but I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
From at least the 1500s, the Moors also conducted raids on the seaside towns of Italy, Spain, France, England, the Netherlands, Iceland, etc., etc., etc. And this is why the Italians don't like the Sicilians, because in Sicily there was a Moorish emirate or Moorish rulers in Sicily. So a lot of the Sicilians have mixed Moorish blood. This is why the Italians don't like them.
Yeah, they're more brown. The Sicilians are
Yeah.
more brown. They look more like.
Because of us, that's why, because they have our blood in them. In 1544, Barbossa captured the island of Ischia, taking 4,000 prisoners and enslaved 2,000 to 7,000 inhabitants. In 1551, the Ottoman corsair Dragut enslaved the entire population of Maltese islands of Gozo, between 5,000 and 6,000 people. And this is where the Knights of Malta comes from. Malta is a city in Sicily. The Knights of Malta, which if you look up right now, they're a Masonic group. They started as military knights to pay money to African kings to have their fellow European pale-skinned captives freed. They then changed from more church activity to more military activity and waged war against us. This is where the Crusades comes from. So they started off as church organizations to pay ransom to have their people freed, and then they fought against us. So this is where this whole idea of the Masons are a secret society and they rule everything, this is where the origin is. And then you see more slave raids, more stuff. So as an example, 5,000 inhabitants, another 6,000 inhabitants were made slaves. In 1558, another 4,000 people were put into slavery. In 1618, the Algerian Moors attacked the Canary Islands, taking 1,000 captives to be sold as slaves. On other occasions, in settlements in Baltimore, these places ended up being abandoned because of constant raiding and constant taking of their men, women, and children as slaves. So they went more inland or they went more north. So while the Moorish fleet looted cargo ships, they captured many people, and their primary goal was to capture non-Muslims as slaves and for ransom, because wars were being waged by different kingdoms. So they were saying, you know, as a result of war, they were taking people and saying, to economically drain whoever you're at war with, they would have captives and say, give us money and we'll release them. So that way they couldn't fund the war effort, right? There was a famous author who was held captive for 5 years, from 1575 to 1580. And he talks about how people were put into forced servitude. And here's an image of a few crusaders. And this source right here, Britannica.com, shows you the Order of Our Lady, also called the Knights of St. Ulia, or however you pronounce that, was a religious order in Spain in 1218 for the purposes of ransoming Christian captives from Moors. This is from Britannica.com. So they specifically say these Europeans established religious military orders to pay to free Europeans. How many of you knew that? Right? So custom statistics from the 16th to 17th century suggest that Istanbul, who knows where Istanbul is?
Turkey.
Modern day Turkey. What was Istanbul also called? Constantinople. You know, stop answering. Additional slave imports from the Black Sea may have totaled around 2.5 million. How many of you knew that? That there were 2.5 million pale-skinned European slaves held by dark-skinned Africans. Who knew that? Because I can tell you, when I graduated high school in 2010, they never told me this. Ever.
And they won't.
But they taught me a bunch of Edgar Allan Poe and Greek mythology. Yeah. We also had slaves here in the United States. I'll show you that. The Moorish slave trade existed in the British colonies. In the 1700s, the colony of Virginia made the slave trade based on skin complexion. So we'll read it. This is an act concerning servants and slaves in 1705. This is from the colony of Virginia. So before it became the United States, there were 13 British colonies or 13 colonies under various different Christian kingdoms' control. So some of them were the Dutch, some of them were Spanish, some of them were British, depending on which country had a treaty with the Moors and were able to establish charters. So Act 4 says, and also be enacted by the authority aforesaid, and it is hereby enacted that all servants imported and brought into this country by sea or land who were not Christians in their native country, except Turks and Moors, in amity with Her Majesty. What does that mean? That means there's a peace treaty between the Moroccan Empire and the British Empire. Right? So if you were part of the Moroccan Empire and you had a treaty with the British, you couldn't be a slave. Other people could, but you couldn't. Right? Or there would be war. And others that can make due proof of their being free in England or any other Christian country before they were shipped, in order to transportation hither, shall be accounted and be slaves, and such be here bought and sold, notwithstanding a conversion to Christianity afterwards. So if you were brought from some other country here as a slave, you're a slave. Unless you can prove that where you came from you weren't a slave, or you can prove that you're a Moor or a Turk. Then you'll be freed. Right? So regardless of your skin tone, if you can say, wait a minute, no, I'm a Moor, I have allegiance to the Sultan of Morocco, and we have a treaty with Britain, I can't be a slave, then they would free you. Does everyone understand that? Because that's very important for us to understand. Okay. Article 11. And for a further Christian care and usage of all Christian servants, be it also enacted by the authority aforesaid, and it is hereby enacted that no Negroes, mulattoes, or Indian, although Christians, or Jews, Moors, Mohammedans, or other infidels, shall at any time purchase any Christian servant, nor any other, except of their own complexion. So what does this imply? This implies that before this act, there were people, dark-skinned people, in the colonies here in North America that had slaves that were what? White. How many of you knew this? Except for you. Stop answering. How many of us were taught this in high school? We were just told, you're niggers, and you're picking cotton, and that's it. That's it. Trash.
Like I hated history class. Like I just, with these white teachers.
Because they never told you anything that's uplifting. It was just, you're a nigger slave, that's it. Yeah, same crap. So now imagine what your mindset would have been if you knew this. You probably would have thought, wait a minute. If there were blacks that weren't slaves, then I'm probably not a descendant of a slave.
Which is why they intentionally.
Hide stuff.
Intentionally.
I've spoken to many of our people, and the majority of them cannot find one record that shows that they're a descendant of a slave. They just have this belief that they were. That doesn't mean that you were, right? Where else? Or such as are declared slaves by this act, and if any Negro, mulatto, or Indian, Jew, Moor, Mohammedan, or other infidel, or such as are declared slaves by this act shall, notwithstanding, purchase any Christian white servant, the said servant shall ipso facto become free and acquit from any service then due, and shall be so held, deemed, and taken. And if any person having such Christian servant shall intermarry with any such Negro, mulatto, or Indian, Jew, Moor, Mohammedan, or infidel, every Christian white servant of every such person so intermarrying shall ipso facto become free and equipped from any service then due to such master or mistress so intermarrying as aforesaid. So now if we're told that if you're a so-called black slave master and you intermarry with a so-called white person, then your slaves will be free. Right? So wouldn't that incentivize them to promote this idea that they cannot intermarry? And this is where we get this idea of blacks can't marry whites, because they were shifting the slave trade from religious-based to color-based. Because of this history of dark-skinned African Muslims enslaving them and them consistently fighting against it. So they made it illegal. Right? The power and influence of the Moorish Empire during this time was such that nations, including the United States, paid tribute in order to stave off their attacks. In the first years of the 19th century, the United States, allied with European nations, fought and won the First and Second Barbary Wars. These wars were a direct response of the U.S., British, French, and the Dutch states to the raids and there's a typo. They were a direct response to resist the slave raids that the Moors were conducting on their people, right? The Moorish slave trade and slave markets in Europe declined and eventually disappeared after the European occupations. After being defeated in this period of formal hostilities with European and U.S. powers, the Moroccan Empire went into a decline, and this is where we lost our identity. The Moors refused to cease their slaving operations, resulting in another bombardment by the Royal Navy fleet against Algiers in 1824. France invaded Algiers in 1830, placing it under colonial rule. Tunis was similarly invaded by France in 1881. Tripoli returned to direct Ottoman control in 1835. And this paints the picture of where modern-day colonization of Africa comes from. In the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, it was a direct result of this.
So Moroccans speak French?
Yes, and a direct result of World War I and World War II, where the British admit that, what's his name, Lawrence of Arabia was a British spy to divide up the Islamic bloc. That's what World War I and World War II was about. And this is where the problems of modern-day Palestine come from, because of the Sykes-Picot Agreement and the secret agreement that the British had with the Zionists, and how the British were playing the Ottomans and the Arabs, Sultan Abdul Aziz ibn Saud of Saudi Arabia, double dealing with them, secretly trying to divide up Syria, Palestine, Jordan, and Iraq. This is where it all comes from. This. Once we were defeated, the rest of the world was defeated. We have to understand our importance in history and in world politics. Because once our people fell, the rest of the world fell. Right? So you're important. The end of the Mexican and Moorish wars of the early and late 1800s is what led to the full colonization of the Americas and Africa. See the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885. The enslavement of Moors in America and the census identification to erase our identities, and the fact that many of us were Native Americans, is the cause of much confusion regarding the identity of many so-called Black Americans. It is documented that many Aboriginal and indigenous people were classified as Negro, Blacks, and colored based on skin complexion. This is documented. Documented. Just look it up. Just Google search Native American Indians classified as Negro, Native American Indians classified as Black, Native American Indians classified as people of color, and you'll see it. So if you, let's say me, right, as an example, if I'm looking at my, the census records of my family, as an example, my grandmother's birth certificate says Negroid, how do I know that her mother's mother wasn't a Native American and they just called her colored?
They would call them Indians.
Or red men, right? So this is how they erased us, through census, right? And then these two things, let's see if the links work. This is from Illinois General Assembly. See that, right? See illinois.gov, right? So this is not my personal opinion. This is from the state of Illinois. The Moorish Americans are descendants of the ancient Moabites. Isn't that what I said earlier? The Moorish people are indigenous to the Americas. You see that? according to the state of Illinois, the Moorish Americans being aboriginal to the territories of North, South, and Central America. You see that?
But I feel like that brings a lot of confusion, and that's kind of like what aggravates me about like the fact that like it's so blended in. I'm Dominican, so
Yeah.
when I think about like my cultural reference to Native Americans,
Yeah.
I think about the Taino Native Americans that live there.
You know what else? You know what else you have to think about? How the word Dominican is from Saint Dominique in the Dominican Order of Christ, and how those pale-skinned Christians were charged by the Pope of Rome to wage war against the Moors.
In Dominican Republic.
Yeah, that was their job. Look it up. So now when they go to this land of the Moors, they conquer them and say, you belong to Saint Dominic, so now you're Dominican. This is why on Dominican Republic's coat of arms, you have the goat and all Christian symbols. When you look at the Haitian coat of arms, you have a palm tree, which is known to be Moorish, and what's called a red Phrygian cap, which derives from the fez. On many South American countries' coat of arms, you have fezzes on their coat of arms. And then the Prime Minister of Turkey, just look it up, there was a South American Latino Muslim conference, and he said Muslims arrived in America centuries before Christopher Columbus.
Yeah, what was that guy? What was the African king's name that he went
Mansa
into
Musa.
Yeah, Mansa Musa, that he went into South America, and that's why there's a lot of where's Dr. Sebi from? Yes,
Yeah.
them. What are they called again?
Who?
Where Dr. Sebi's from?
I have no idea where he's from. Honduras.
Huh?
Honduras.
Yes, he's from. There's a lot of like Africans in Honduras.
So here's another link. This is from the state of Georgia. You see that? ga.gov. Actually, let me go back to the state of Illinois. So as a result of the 13th Amendment, Moorish people were emancipated from slavery. So all the celebration of Juneteenth, why isn't this mentioned? Because this is from the state of Illinois. This is an official state of the United States recognizing this. And then this is from the state of Georgia, which says what? Moorish Americans are the foremothers and forefathers of the human family, descendants of the ancient Moabites. Moorish Americans are teaching their people their true nationality and divine creed, that they may become better citizens and know that they are not Negro, colored folk, black people, nor Afros, because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865. Moorish Americans being aboriginal to the territories of North, South, and Central America. And then as a result of the 13th Amendment, Moorish Americans were emancipated. Right? And then this right here, and we're going to take a break after this video. This right here is from the movie Robin Hood. We're going to take a 10-minute break. The movie Robin Hood, where Jamie Foxx, you know the story of Robin Hood, right? Take from the rich, give to the poor. It's about the Crusades and how Lord Loxley was sent to fight in the Crusades, and then his property was taken through escheat, because during that time in Europe, there was something called feudal tenures. Feudal tenures meant you actually can't own the land. The king owns it. He has lords under him, and then he gives those lords permission to govern the land, and then those lords give you permission and me permission through vassalage to live in the land. And the vassalage means we'll serve in their military and we'll show up to their councils. We'll participate in them ruling us. And in return, they'll let us live. So Lord Loxley was sent to fight in the Crusades. His property was taken via escheat because he was declared dead. He came back, realized the corruption, and he was trained by this Moorish commander to fight against the Crusaders. And this is one of the scenes from the movie. So these are the Crusaders. That's Jamie Foxx. When they played this in the movie theater, I stood up and clapped. We'll take a 10-minute break. And the reason why I stood up and clapped is because they're actually showing this actually happened. The Crusades was actual wars against. You seen who all the Christians were. You see who all the Muslims were. You see all their skin color. They're showing you what it is. They're just putting it in a movie. That's why I stood up and clapped. We'll take a 10-minute break. I have to pray.
I have to check my phone. You don't have a phone addiction. Talk to Dina.
Paying attention?
What do you mean, no, Olu?
So when I had this bright idea, huh?
You know Supreme is here?
He's gone for the day.
He's gone already?
As far as I know, he's gone for the day.
Okay, thank you.
So Dina and Olu. Dina doesn't know where she's going, don't tell her. Okay? You should do, I told you.
Oh, you didn't tell her anything?
Okay, so yeah. So I forgot that my son was coming to get the car to go to work. So I asked Fran if she would drop us off. I asked Fran if she would drop us off. And my brother Arthur, you probably know him, will bring us home.
Who's that? Yeah, because I have the car seat, and then I have 1, 2, 3. I only have 3 seats. So we're gonna have to lap up, baby. We're gonna have to be squished, but I mean, I like it. You know, I'm cool with it.
We can do it. We can do it.
And I live over there. I live in Southside Providence, so I have to pass like Eddy Street, like kind of like all of that to get home.
So it's not going out of your way.
No, like I have to pass Broad Street to go home.
Or we could take a lift. Can somebody find out what a lift would cost?
Girl, yes, is the mouse right there on Eddy Street?
From here to there.
Which mouse though? The one that's on Perry Ave?
Yeah.
Perry Ave and what?
Prairie and I get it mixed up with the Met School, near the Met School. So if you take an Uber from here to the Met School.
Oh, I know exactly where. Okay.
How much is that?
Like 16, 17.
Yeah, like not a lot.
Yeah, I can call you guys a lift. What's it called?
Don't tell Dina where she's going.
She already knows.
My bad. Did I say it? Because if I said it, I'm gonna feel real bad.
You did, but it's okay. I just needed to know.
Okay.
People should know when they're on.
How do you? Okay. Is it the Masjid Al Kareem? Maybe I'm saying that wrong. Let me Google search this. Okay, it's definitely not that one. Mosque. He's praying. Come over here. Come over here. Okay, I think it's this one. He's talking to God. She's watching God. She's stretching. Is it the Muslim community of center of Rhode Island, or is it the Islamic center of Rhode Island? Which one do you?
It's not neither of those.
I didn't tell her. So it's not this one, right?
No. No. I can tell you what it is.
No.
It's not Florida, it's Perry and by Rose Park, yes. That's it.
I live on the street.
Okay, then we should drive it. Yeah. Drive it up on in there.
312 Perry. Okay, let me look it up.
Yeah, let me know how much it lives with me because it's gonna be crowded.
You know, I used to go to church there, that little building right there. There used to be a Pentecostal. A long time ago.
Isn't it just one across the street?
I think so, but that little building used to be a Pentecostal church a long time ago. It's like $14. She's cute. She likes me. Yeah, I had to take her pants off. She was not feeling it.
That was 10 minutes, right? No? It was less than 10 minutes? 8 minutes?
7 minutes.
We can start with it again whenever y'all ready.
She is. She's only 3 months. She actually is like a season. She was like trying to sit up and stuff. Yeah. Be a baby. Be a baby. Be a baby. So I put her in the little like thingy, and I most definitely.
Boys, stop running around.
I strapped her in. Blowing her. My grandma was like changing her diaper, and I guess I had like the window open, and like the sunlight was coming in. She was trying to like catch the rays. My baby, she didn't get it. Like trying to catch the rays.
Find another book and relax. That's enough of that.
Y'all ready? So this, I didn't bring the book. This book, Morocco as It Is by Stephen Bonzal Jr. This is a quote from the book. The representatives of Her Majesty, meaning Queen of England, is now no longer compelled by the ceremonial of the Sharifian court. The word Sharif means noble in Arabic. The noble court to kneel and bow his forehead to the ground in the awful presence of the Negroid monarch. The British ambassador and envoy plenipotentiary of Her Gracious Majesty, surrounded by his suite, standing bareheaded in the midday sun, awaiting the coming of the Black Amoor Sultan. This ceremony, so humiliating and undignified for the representative of a great Christian power, only 40 years ago, when every nation of Christendom paid and right cheerfully to the Sultan a tribute. So every pale-skinned Christian country was paying so-called Negro monarchs or black sultans to just exist. Did you know that? So when we talk about the great African rulers of Africa, why doesn't this get mentioned? That these great African rulers were known as Moors, they were Muslims, and all of the Christian kingdoms of Europe that we identify today paid tribute to those people to just exist.
They were just like so rich, maybe.
It was all the gold. Africa was all the diamonds. Africa
The gold.
was all the ivory. Africa,
There's nothing in Europe. What do they have
nothing.
in Europe?
Marsh, wetlands.
That's it.
Right. Sultan Sidi Muhammad seized a U.S. colonial merchant ship due to the fact that the newly established United States colonies had ignored diplomatic communications. On October 11th, 1784, the United States brigantine ship Betsy was taken by the Moroccan Empire. The United States Congress appropriated $80,000 to buy immunity from the Moroccan Empire. On May 12, 1784, the United States of America in Congress assembled by their commission constituted John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson, their ministers plenipotentiary, giving to them, or a majority of them, full powers to confer, treat, and negotiate with the ambassador, minister, or commissioner of the Emperor of Morocco. concerning the treaty of amity and commerce, to make and receive propositions for the treaty, and to conclude and sign the same, transmitting it to the United States in Congress assembled for their final ratification in attempts to end the wars between us and them. So when you study the 13 colonies and their separation from the British had treaties with the Empire of Morocco. Once the United States separated from British control, there was nothing protecting them from the Moorish Navy. So they had to create a new treaty as a new nation of people. Does that make sense? Great. The United States began to make annual payments of up to $1 million to the Moors for 15 years. And that's gold and silver, real money, right?
Why we're so broke, United States.
$1 million to the Moors for 15 years for the safe passage of United States ships and the return of United States prisoners, because they were made slaves. In 1786, Thomas Jefferson, United States ambassador to France, and John Adams, United States ambassador for Britain, met in London with Sidi Haj Abdul Rahman Adjah, the day's ambassador to Britain, and attempts to negotiate a peace treaty. The Treaty of Peace and Friendship between the United States and Morocco was signed June 28, 1786. The Treaty of Peace and Friendship between the United States and the Moroccan Empire was enforced January 1787, which established 50 years of peace with the United States and Morocco. Now, this is very important. December the 1st, 1789, George Washington wrote a letter to the Sultan of Morocco, and we will read that right now. So as you can see, this is from archive.gov. This is not my personal opinion. And we will see, we'll zoom in, George Washington to the Sultan of Morocco, December the 1st, 1789. Since the date of the letter which the late Congress by their president addressed to your imperial majesty, the United States of America have thought proper to change their government and institute a new one agreeable to the Constitution, of which I have the honor herewith to enclose a copy. This is powerful. Why? Because George Washington talks about a president before him, but we're told he's what? The first president. Then he's explaining that they're establishing a new government and they're giving him a copy of their Constitution. What nation does that?
Do you think they still have it, like the Moroccans?
Probably.
Like, do you think, like, with all the wars and stuff like that, like, they still have it in their position?
Probably.
That's cool.
Probably, right? The time necessarily employed in the oroneous task in the derangements occasioned by so great though peaceful revolution will apologize and account for your majesty not having received those regular advices and marks of attention from the United States,
Money, right?
Yeah, money and written correspondences back and forth, which the friendship and magnanimity of your conduct towards them afford reason to expect, because Morocco was the first country to recognize the United States as an independent nation separate from the British. The United States having unanimously appointed me to supreme executive authority in this nation, your majesty's letter of August 17th, 1788, which by reason of the dissolution of the late government remained unanswered, has been delivered to me. So there was the first Continental Congress and then the Second Continental Congress. The Second Continental Congress dissolved 1786 after the treaty was signed. And then after the adoption of the Constitution in 1791, that's where it was no longer the Continental Congress, it became the Congress of the United States. Whereas before it was referred to as the Congress of the 13 colonies or the Continental Congress and things of that nature, right? I have also received the letters which your Imperial Majesty has been so kind to write in favor of the United States to the Bashaws of Tunis and Tripoli, and I present to you the sincere acknowledgments and thanks of the United States for this important mark of your friendship towards them. So this shows you that there were other Moors that didn't necessarily like the United States, so the Sultan of the Moroccan Empire was convincing them to be friendly towards the United States. And the United States was thanking our Sultan for that. We greatly regret the hostile disposition of those regencies towards this nation, because remember, they were at war with the British, and the United States colonies were under the British, so they assumed they're still the same people, right? Within our territories, there are no mines, either of gold or silver, and this young nation, just recovering from the waste and dissolution of a long war, the War of Independence, have not as yet had time to acquire riches by agriculture and commerce. But our soil is bountiful and our people industrious, and we have reason to flatter ourselves that we shall gradually become useful to our friends. The encouragement which your majesty has been pleased generously to give to our commerce within your dominions. What does that mean? What does dominions mean?
Like our things, the things that the state possesses, right?
Yes, it means land and sovereignty. So the United States is thanking the Sultan of Morocco for allowing them to do business
In the United States.
in the United States,
Hello.
which belongs to who?
The what? The
The
British.
Sultan of Morocco.
Oh, okay. That's crazy.
Now, I see your face, but when you research, and I please do.
No, because I was so Morocco,
Mhm.
what owned
Here.
here?
Yes.
So did we fund
That's-
them to come to the United States?
So
Did the Moors
So-
fund them?
when you research every colony, all 13 of them, there's something called a charter, right? When you look what happened before the charter, every time there's a charter issued for a new colony here in North America, that same monarch signed a treaty of peace and friendship with the Sultan of Morocco to have free commerce and to free the European slaves in Morocco, which resulted in the colony here. That's their origin. This confirms it. And then again, when you do your own research, I have a book on it, but when you do your own research, as an example, look up the Charter of Rhode Island, 1666, or Providence, 1666. You'll see King Charles II. Look up right before that. You'll see King Charles II signs a treaty of peace and friendship with the Sultan of Morocco. Look up New York,
So
Yorkshire. Hold on, the Dutch fur trade, 1621, 1633. You'll see the Dutch have free commerce in Morocco after a treaty of peace and friendship was signed between the Low Countries and the Sultan of Morocco. And then you see the Dutch trade in New York. But then they called that the Lenape Indian Treaty. But then when you look up Title 29, subsection 106, Title 29 of the Delaware Code, Chapter 1, Jurisdiction and Sovereignty, subsection 106, you'll see that the Delaware Lenape Indians were formerly known as Moors, which we went over that last lecture, right? So it's proof. This is why they told us we're not who we are, your Negro black color, so that way you don't connect to this history, right? The punctuality with which you have caused the treaty with us to be observed and the just and generous measures taken in the case of Captain Proctor made a deep impression on the United States and confirmed their respect for and attachment to your imperial majesty. So the United States is attached to the Moroccan Empire. What does that mean? They're on our land. You're on my soil. This is why they gave a copy of the Constitution to the Sultan of Morocco, so that way we can see how they were doing business on our land. Right? It gives me great pleasure to have this opportunity of assuring your majesty that while I remain at the head of this nation, I shall not cease to promote every measure that may conduce to the friendship and harmony which so happily subsists between your empire and them, and shall esteem myself happy in every occasion of convincing your majesty of the high sense which in common with the whole nation I entertain of the magnanimity, wisdom, and benevolence of your majesty. In the course of the approaching winter, the national legislature, which is called by the former name of Congress, will assemble, and I shall take care that nothing be omitted that may be necessary to cause the correspondence between our countries to be maintained and conducted in a manner agreeable to your majesty and satisfactory to all the parties concerned herein. So in this letter, who has the superior position?
The king.
The Sultan of Morocco. Obviously. Right? Signed in the Empire State City of New York, December the 1st, 1789. So this letter was sent before the Constitution was even ratified.
Wow. He's basically almost asking permission. But my question is, what happened to all the riches in Morocco? Like, I know
Colonization.
Ah.
Now this letter, written the same year, 1786, same year the treaty was signed, you'll see that Thomas Jefferson was in opposition to signing a treaty, right? In regard to the Barbary states. You'll see that he had the position of peace through the medium of war. So Thomas Jefferson became the president in the 1800s. This is the start of the Barbary Wars. He was trying to, in this book, The Crescent Obscure by Robert J. Allison, you'll see evidence, documented evidence, that Thomas Jefferson was trying to rally other European nations to fight against the Moors. And their position was, well, we already pay the tribute, we already have a treaty, we have commerce flowing, we don't want to mess that up. Thomas Jefferson didn't like that. So if you read this whole thing, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just so you can see that it's here, peace through the medium of war, Thomas Jefferson, because at the time, 1800s, the United States had no navy. They just got freedom in 1774. So they had no navy. They were reliant on the British Navy. But the British had treaties with the Moroccan Empire because their ships were being taken and they were being made slaves. So once the United States got freedom from them, they no longer had that treaty protection. They could no longer fly the British flag. So they had to enter into a treaty with the Sultan of Morocco because all they had was merchant ships. They didn't have a navy. So Thomas Jefferson said, not a cent for tribute. Well, he said millions for defense, not a cent for tribute. So this is where that peace through the medium of war, he also said this in his letter. This is where that comes from. And this is the start of the Navy of the United States, to fight against our people, right? How many of you knew that during this alleged slave trade, the United States didn't even have a navy?
I didn't know that.
Okay, so how are they bringing slaves here with no navy? Because their main problem on the seas is Moorish pirates. Their ships being taken, their people being taken. They couldn't resist, they couldn't defend themselves against it. So how are they also bringing slaves here if they had no navy? To protect their merchant ships that were being taken by Africans. Right? In 1790, 8 Moors petitioned the South Carolina House of Representatives for a correction of their legal status to be placed on record, noting the fact that they were not black. Therefore, the Christian black codes, or codes noirs as it's known in France, did not apply to them, thus enforcing the Constitution and calling into force international law, which is Article 6 of the Constitution, i.e. the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, demanding that they be treated fairly as other national citizens. And that's known as the Sundry Free Moors Act. You can look that up right now. It's also in this book, the Journals of the House of Representatives, 1789 to 1790, published for the South Carolina Department of Archives and History by the University of South Carolina Press, Columbia, South Carolina. And I'll show you, it starts on page 375, I think. 363. I'll read some of it briefly. A petition was presented to the House from Sundry Free Moors, subject of the Moroccan Empire, and residents in this state, praying that in case they should commit any fault amenable to be brought to justice, that they, as subjects to the prince in alliance with the United States of America, may be treated under the same laws as citizens of this state would be liable to be tried, and not under the Negro Act, which was received and read. So they're saying, hey, we're not slaves. Our country has a treaty with your country, so treat us according to that, not the slave laws, right? And then it continues on page 364. Let me make sure that's where it ends. All right, 364. Where are we at? Then it just goes into the humble petition of Francis, Daniel, Hamad, and Samuel, free Moors, in behalf of themselves and their wives, Fatima, Flora, Sarah, and Clarinda, humbly sheweth that your petitioners some years past had the misfortune, while fighting in defense of their country, to be captured with their wives and made prisoners of war by one of the kings of Africa, that a certain Captain Clark had them delivered to him on a promise that they would be redeemed by the Emperor of Morocco's ambassador, then residing in England, in order to have them returned to their own country, instead of which he brought them to this state, meaning South Carolina, and sold them for slaves. Since that period, they have by the greatest industry been enabled to purchase their freedom from their respective masters. And now prayeth your honorable house that as free-born subjects of a prince now in alliance with the United States, that they may not be considered as subjects to the laws of this state, now called the Negro Law, but if they should unfortunately be guilty of any crime or misconduct against the laws of this land, that they may have a just trial by a lawful jury, and your petitioners, as in duty bound, will ever pray. Right? So does everyone understand that?
Yes.
That they're saying, we're not slaves. We have our own country. Okay. Huh? Okay. I'll try to wrap it up then. And then you'll see right here on this page, 373, Mr. reported from the committee on whom was referred the petition of the Sons of Free Moors, which he read in his place and afterwards delivered it in at the clerk's table, where it was again read for information, ordered that it be taken into immediate consideration, which being read through was agreed to as follows. Report that they have considered the same and are of the opinion that no law of this state can its construction or operation apply to them, and that persons who are subjects of the Emperor of Morocco being free in the state are not triable by the law for the better ordering and governing of Negroes and other slaves. So they didn't get their freedom and then assimilate into the colonies. They said no. Hold on, did you unplug something? Oh yeah, you did.
Oh, my bad. I just took my charger off.
It's okay.
My bad.
The computer turned off.
I apologize.
It's okay.
You need it back?
No. It's when I took the charger box off, I also turned off the TV by accident.
And the computer.
And the computer. Yeah, I apologize.
It's okay.
Sorry.
It's just this has problems turning back on when it's unplugged like that.
Dang. Okay, my bad.
It's okay.
Oh, God is good.
Yeah, it's a TV, but we gotta get the computer to work. That's the problem.
Jamal, I gotta be at this place at 7.
Okay, so we can end it for here. We can end it here.
I apologize.
It's
did
okay.
not mean
It's okay.
it to end like this, though.
It's okay, and we can continue with the rest of the slides next week.
Okay.
Who learned something today?
I didn't learn any of those.
Wow, I was about to say, dang. Any questions
I have
as we wrap it up? Yes.
Do you think, is that why, like in North Africa, why is it that North Africa is considered
White?
white Africa?
Yeah.
And that any person that's born in North Africa
Yeah.
is
So
automatically,
that's again the
is it
classification.
to separate?
Yes, and remember, North Africa has always been subject to European control, whether it be the Romans or the Greeks, and it was always Muslims fighting against that. So they're trying to do this divide and conquer thing, and I actually have a presentation on that. How there was a dark-skinned North African man from Egypt that was just as brown as us, who was classified as white. It's just social engineering. It's because here in the United States there's a class. It's a class system within a caste system, and based on your skin color, that determines which class you're in, which classification, and then depending on other factors, that determines your caste. So the upper class is majority white, the lower class is majority black. It's just it's just for the sake of social engineering. And then there's things such as area code, zip code, and district, which determine your given caste. That's what that's for.
There was another name for Africa, right?
Yeah, there's many names.
Oh, many names.
But the word Africa comes from the word afar, which means dust or dirt. And when you look up the etymology of Africa, you'll see that the Romans only applied Africa to the northern regions of Tunis, Tripoli, and Algiers, because that's the full extent that they knew about. They didn't know about
They go
anything
more
else.
south.
And they couldn't. And they referred to it as Africa because it was desert. It was dust. That's where the name comes from.
I was thinking to myself, I was like, wow, I didn't think Morocco was such a powerhouse
Yeah.
in like the world,
Yeah.
And then when I was thinking to myself, like, why are they so poor now? Because they do they have like their economy's not the best right now, but
Yeah.
it makes sense. All the colonization.
Yeah.
They took everything.
Yeah, and it was as a result of the Barbary Wars. That's where it started. And then it just ended up where it is today. And this is why there's so many revolutionary movements still happening to this day because of this history.
Wasn't the first college ever in Morocco?
Not first college ever, but there were many universities established by North African Moors.
Like a woman.
Yeah, so you're talking about I can't remember the name of it. We talked about it last class though.
She was a woman and she started like the first. I guess maybe I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. That is true.
But I always thought it was like in Ethiopia.
Yep.
I thought that was like the first university ever. That's what I always thought. I don't know why.
I mean, I think there was always many universities being established by our people, And throughout history, they've been destroyed and then rebuilt and then destroyed and then rebuilt. And I think between the destruction and rebuilt, then they say the first. Just like today, you know, we hear the first black doctor, the first black lawyer, the first female black this. That's not true. In Al-Andalus, during our Moorish rule, we had female doctors, female lawyers. There were rich people. There were scientists. All of them had our skin color. But we're going from a position of we were destroyed, so now it's the first this and the first that and the first this and the first that. But in reality, it's not.
So guys, are any of those toys, didn't do that, does that toy
My
belong in here?
great grandmother.
That
Yeah.
toy right there?
Yep.
In Angola.
Puzzles, that's
And
not
she
mine.
married one of the slaves and had children, but she
Yeah.
gave them all her last name. So
So
we
Yeah.
have nothing. So we all have like my mom's side.
Yeah.
Santos, which
All
is a
the way the
Portuguese
children are
name.
not going.
Yeah.
But we're trying to find out how
Well,
history.
Portugal was ruled by Moors.
And I'm gonna.
So we're like, we really don't know
Okay, so just-
the other side, we just know that we have Santos.
Like I said, you're on my way home.
But who the
so I'm
person
not
was
going
that shed the
on. I live right
children?
up here.
We don't know.
Okay, is there food on
Just
here?
like trying to.
I know, but I can
And
take
it's
it
hard
off
for me because I'm like,
Is
that
it nearby?
came from a different
The
country.
street's the
Yeah.
other street.
Yeah.
So
I don't know, I'm from Boston, honey, I
never
don't
did,
know.
you know, so we were
It's-
like,
I
how
did
did
it,
but what do you
this is
want,
another
though?
form of
I never
Yeah.
went this
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
you know.
Neo,
food in
neo,
my house.
they call it neo-colonialism, but it's colonialism and it's slavery. Yeah.
So it's just
And I was in the bed.
Yeah.
trying to find out.
I was
Yeah, and that's
in
the same
bed
boat we're in.
Rather than at the
You know,
grocery store,
and
knowing my son needed
again, like I
pasta.
said, a lot of our
When I
people,
get
there is
home,
no
I'm
records of
starving
slavery.
already.
It's just a name that appears to be European, but it could be Moors from Al-Andalus that had this name. You know?
And she likes it.
And we have to stop focusing on colorism and talk about bloodline. What's the blood of these people? You know, because like we talked about earlier, Sicilians have our blood. That's why Italians don't like them.
So.
You know, and just like with the slave laws, if you had a drop of Moorish blood, you were a slave.
I don't mind hanging out.
You know, so we have to get away from the colorism because that was used to keep us, to control us. That's why those Moors, through the Sundry Free Moors petition, said, don't treat us like that.
See what he just
Treat
did,
us like
pushing on
free
the
national beings. And if you don't, our nation has a whole military. You know, we need to understand the importance of that. You know, the status of being free and the status of being a slave. Because our people ended up assimilating into the colonies as opposed to doing what the Sundry Free Moors did, saying, okay, well, we're from this country. We don't want to be treated like we're part of your society. Treat us like we're part of our own society. You know, and that's where we made a mistake. We decided to assimilate and march for civil rights as opposed to saying, nope, we're going to separate and try to connect or reestablish our old empires and our old countries where we are. Because that's what they did. They just colonized everything.
So.
So let's decolonize.
I gotta take Christianity to get to there, and you gotta take Islam to get there, Islam to get there.